everybody, to the Thursday, March 10th, 2022 Town Board Workshop. We have 3 agenda items tonight for presentations and discussion. And the first one is a presentation on the current condition of the Arbor Creek Subdivision Bridge by Town Engineer Mary Harrington. So Mary, I'll hand the baton to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tom. And I also have Pat Stevens, Highway Superintendent, who's going to be assisting in this. So the things that we're going to touch on tonight is just an overview of the Arbor Creek subdivision, the timeline of events in relation to our bridge discoveries, bridge construction discussion, the design deficiencies that have been identified by consultants and other agencies, possible solutions and their challenges, the current condition of the bridge, and then how we propose to move forward. So a little history on this subdivision. The developer was Pridemark Homes. The subdivision in Section 1 timeline, which the bridge was constructed during Section 1. In October of 2013, the parcel was rezoned from an R3 single-family residential district to medium-high residential district. In August of 2014, they received Section 1 approval from the Planning Board. And then by July of 2016, the site work for Section 1, which included the bridge work, was completed. And then just some unique features about this subdivision. They are close to the FEMA floodplain, so that was something that was discussed at length during the Planning Board approvals. 84 of the acres of this parcel were donated to the town and exist as park district or park lands, and it's an HOA community. And right now, the subdivision recently finished their final section, which was Section 4. So a timeline of events in relation to the bridge. So in November of 2017, the town took permanent dedication of the road and bridge for Arbor Creek Subsection 1. In November of 2020, the Highway Department noticed longitudinal surface cracking on the bridge. The former highway superintendent and another town staff met on site with Monroe County DOT, and that expert in the field recommended that we invest in an engineering assessment of the bridge. The town contracted with Ravi Engineering to provide that assessment report right after that site visit in December of 2020 through January of 21. The next few months were kind of a discovery phase for the town. We were reviewing the report, consulting with Monroe County DOT, and then we also, the supervisor sat down and discussed the findings with the developer, Pridemark. In the summer of last year, we had further discussions with Ravi, and they were able to get a contact with New York State Region 4, the structures management engineer, and Pat and myself met on site to review his assessment of the conditions. In August of last year, we received a written assessment from that Region 4 structures management engineer. We also worked with New York State DOT to assign a BIN, a bridge identification number, to this bridge. Any structure that is 20 feet or greater in span has to be registered with New York State DOT. And then part of being in that registration, New York State DOT will perform an annual general bridge inspection. So we were given that report too towards the end of last year. In September, the supervisor relayed the written assessment from New York State DOT to the developer, and we were requesting greater detail of the design from Pridemark and their contracted engineering team. And then over the past few months, we've further investigated the situation between conversations with New York State DOT, Monroe County DOT, and Ravi Engineering. We have not obtained any further information from Pridemark and their engineers. And so that brings us to this town board workshop and discussing an action plan. So for the bridge construction, while we were going through the site plan review process back in 2014, 2015, the town was provided plans and details for the bridge. These plans were prepared and stamped by a licensed engineer at Marathon Engineering. And then specifically to the structural design plans and loading calculations for the bridge, this was a delegated design that was prepared and stamped by a licensed structural engineer, Albert and Rice Incorporated. The bridge in the field was installed in accordance with the design plans referenced above. And based on the conclusions rendered by New York State DOT, Monroe County DOT, and Ravi Engineering, the current deficiencies and premature wear are the direct result of failures in the design. So these design deficiencies, and again, I'll reiterate that these are conclusions by our consultants and other agencies who specify in this type of work. Undersized plank units. The bridge is composed of 6 planks that go, I guess, lengthwise. The way that you drive, they don't go perpendicular, they go parallel to the way you drive across them. And these planks are 8 inches in thickness, and based on the span, you'd expect them to be 15 inches in thickness. And there's also varying widths so that each plank isn't able to withstand the same loading. So there's kind of inconsistent load spread across the planks. And given the climate and application, these plank units aren't specified. The plank units specified in this work should not have been used for a bridge in Western New York. These pre-stressed, prefabricated concrete planks are used in building construction. So they're not intended to be out in the elements. They're intended for interior applications. And they're also more flexible than what you would construct a bridge out of. There is a lack of mechanical shear connectors between the planks and the supporting beams so that there's not as great of a load transfer between the horizontal and the vertical components of the bridge. And there's a lack of transverse tendons to distribute the loads across the planks. So these varying widths of 190 and 50 inches of planks, they don't work as one coherent surface. So they aren't able to distribute loads between one another. And then there's also question as to whether the foundation design renders them susceptible to scour. It appears that it is a spread footing on native soils, which is not the recommended methodology for installing these next to a creek. I'll turn it over to Pat.
Okay, I'll take some of these solutions and run through them. There's been a great deal of thought on our part and review of potential options for dealing with the conditions that Mary just outlined, and this presentation does. The first couple are ones that we've basically ruled out. Option 1 would be rehabilitating the existing plank units. The inadequacies in this approach would be that the planks weren't originally aren't the right product for this application to begin with. They're susceptible to salt and moisture damage, as we've already seen, and they will likely continue to fatigue due to their flexibility over time. And it does not remove the concern of the foundation scour, which is the vertical portion of the structure. Option 2 would be to replace the plank units. So taking the 8-inch thick planking units that are currently in place and replacing them with the approximately 15-inch thick planks, possibly, depending on the design that would come with them. This would actually result in a misalignment of the roadway, and that would be a vertical misalignment. So essentially, in order to increase the thickness of the planking on the bridge, it would raise it. So you would either have a hump coming into it, or you'd have to elongate sort of a tapered going up onto the bridge and then coming back down, which just isn't ideal for driving or maintenance on those surfaces, especially plowing and resurfacing operations that our highway department would want to do on this facility. And it also does not remove the concern of scour with the foundation. So that's why those options that we looked into are not particularly feasible as actual solutions. So we move into viable solutions. So these are possible remedies for the conditions that we have. Complete replacement. So essentially take out what's there and replace it in kind, obviously with some different materials and options put in place, but to have a abutment and decking style bridge replace them. That would be by far the most expensive option. That approach, although it allows for the alleviation of permitting, so it allows us to stay completely out of the stream and the water body. And that type of construction is more expensive, just dollars and cents wise. So and it doesn't really gain you any functionality on our end with the maintenance and operation of what happens. There's no advantage to going that route other than staying out of the stream. So that's that approach. Option 4 would be to replace with a precast box culvert and leave the abutments in place. So the abutments would be there. You wouldn't have to pay to remove them, but they wouldn't function as abutments anymore. They would just be left behind the box culvert. This is a less expensive option, not cheap, but less expensive, so still very costly. Placing a permanent structure within the stream, as I said, would require coordination with New York State DEC and Army Corps of Engineers in order to get permits to put such a structure in. And the existing enhancements to the bridge aesthetics would not be financially feasible to replace. The current bridge has a lot of aesthetic features on it. Given the situation we're in as the town, it's, in our opinion, and most likely financially as we move forward with the options moving on this, not likely that it would be responsible of us to spend taxpayer dollars on the level of aesthetic that is there now. Just from a purely visual standpoint, we would go for the most cost-effective functional replacement of the feature. Then we move on to the current conditions. So to further outline some of the operational current conditions of the bridge, the reports that we have, the New York State DOT does not recommend reducing load capacity, although we already have out of abundance of caution with the type of deterioration we're seeing. We will keep the 4-ton posting to reduce the routine heavy traffic, which will help extend the lifespan of the existing bridge until we can hopefully come to a conclusion on a remedy. The New York State rates the bridge as fair to good in their current report, and they are the entity that sort of does this throughout the state and has the standard for the condition of bridges. The expected lifespan of this bridge upon being brand new would be expected to be a 70-year item before it would need a level of replacement or repair. The current anticipated replacement for this is 10 to 15 years before we need to essentially have one of the options we're outlining here in place. That will be the life expectancy of the bridge in its current condition, given everything that's been mentioned, instead of 70. So with that, we've identified the action items we'd like to pursue moving forward. We're going to coordinate with the New York State DOT to have a hydraulic vulnerabilities assessment completed on it. Essentially, that speaks to the scour aspect that we've been identifying. So the foundations in a flood situation, what is the actual feasibility of having a complete washout of the foundation of the bridge. Then along with that, if needed, based on that assessment, we would develop a floodplain warning action plan, again, if necessary. Schedule a meeting with New York State DOT local projects unit to understand the availability of funding for these type of repairs. They do have a grant program that happens annually that you apply for. They do prioritize it based on the condition of the bridge. We would certainly qualify for that, but given the age of the bridge and the condition, and how many people apply, that's what determines, just like any grant, whether we would actually receive funding for that or not. And really, that's within that 10 to 15 year time frame that we talked about. That would be when we would have to make a decision, or at least have funding in place. We do want to reach out to the actual design engineers directly versus through the developer, Pridemark. It's not likely, in our opinion, that we will receive direct design information directly from the engineers, as we did not procure it from them. We have no contracts with these companies that would facilitate them releasing the information to us, which is why we've tried to coordinate through the developer. They are the ones that contracted for the services for the design, and we have not been able to obtain that information through that channel. We also are going to continue to receive and review New York State DOT annual bridge inspection reports to monitor the condition as regularly as possible to make sure it doesn't change course, deteriorate faster than we expect, and remains in a good to fair condition where no further restrictions have to be put on it. So.
When you say
Questions?
10 to 15-year lifespan, is that from when it was installed or from today at its present condition?
From installation, so we're looking at doing something in the next 5 to 10 years.
And thank you, Patty, for starting the Q&A. I will say that, first of all, Mary and Pat, thank you. Very thorough presentation. I think certainly we're going to allow us to go beyond the 15-minute increment on this one. Sorry, Chris and Steve and whatever, we'll back up a little, depending on the robust questions that the board has on this. So thank you, Patty, for starting out the questions.
Oh, sorry, I just jumped in.
I'm glad you did.
Okay.
Now, Councilman Abbott, your head's got to be spinning being an engineer by trade.
We accepted the engineer's design for this bridge. There had to have been something in our review that indicated it was acceptable, that the calculations were correct. But if it was built incorrectly because the wrong size planks were used, I would think that we could go back to the developer and have some legal ramifications with that developer.
Well,
Can I speak to that a little
please
bit?
do, Mary.
So based on the calculations that were provided by the design engineer, they assumed that there were connections between the planks and the abutments that weren't actually in place, and they were designed. It's my understanding that the way that it was implemented in the field was per their design, so they made errors in their calculation by assuming that these connections were there, even though they didn't put it in what their design documents were. So if you rerun the calculations as it currently stands in the field without these connections, they differ from what the design engineer provided as backup. So there's inaccuracies in the calculations that were provided to the town, and I don't think without the town having a structural engineer and with this being a delegated design, it's really something that would be not caught during the process. It's up to them to,
That's what I'm saying.
provide the right calculations.
They provided incorrect calculations to us, therefore it should fall back on them for the responsibility for the repairs or however we proceed, at least in some financial position.
Yeah, and this setup and presentation that we've put together here is basically in separate to that we have a dedicated bridge. It's documenting the condition of it and whatnot. I think that's still valid, but one way or another, this is, moving forward, what needs to happen to focus on the remedy versus some of the other logistics that could happen during that process in
And-
relation
and-
to what you're talking about.
Bill, I will tell you this, and Charlie, I know that as our town attorney, you were involved in a lot of the back and forth on this issue. Oh, actually, I don't have my printout here because I just handed it to you. No, that's okay. I don't. The timeline references a couple of things where the supervisor, that's yours truly, had discussions, met with the developer. And, thank you, Mary. And Bill, the best way to sum this up is that the town took dedication of this in 2017. In 2020 is when we noticed there were some problems with this and started that process. At this point now, we own it. So Mary and Pat showed what we have to do as the owners to fix it. Now, as Pat described, I mean, hopefully maybe we can make this a net sum zero game, that if it costs X to fix and we get a grant of X and it now will last 7 years, we live happily ever after and whatever. If it ends up costing the town a lot to fix this bridge and we don't get any grants to offset that, I've been very forthcoming with the developer that we will reserve the right to seek indemnification. But Charlie's is where I would hand the baton.
Well, I'm
here.
not, obviously, I'm not gonna respond on.
Well, there's only one way to get that.
Yeah.
You're talking lawsuit,
Right.
Bill.
Yeah, I understand that.
And you know, without getting into a lot of back and forth on this, at this point, it's my opinion, I mean, we could do a couple things. We could sit there and say, Bill, Patty, Ginny, myself, we'll be long off the board in 10 to 15 years. Kick the can down the road, let the next board years from now handle it. I don't feel good about that. I've told Mary and Pat, let's move this thing along. Let's get the thing resolved now, or as quickly to now as we can. I feel better the fact that, you know, and Mary and Pat know this, when the NYS DOT bridge expert said it's not going to fall down tomorrow, I felt better that day, because we didn't know. You know, to the naked eye, I don't know. You know, it doesn't look good. It's interesting, Bill, and you may know more on this one. Bridges, which is a hot topic with infrastructure and whatever. We were trying to figure out earlier, most of the bridges in Webster are county and state
Correct.
on the arteries. This is a town road, a town bridge. We don't have staff that is equipped to do
No.
the assessment of town bridge. And it's a kit, it's a bridge kit. It's a very ornate bridge, very pretty, this and that. I don't know what other bridges in the town of Webster are on town roads.
Whatever we have is box culvert, I'm pretty sure.
Well, as Pat
Yeah.
said, it's that, is that a bridge or is that more of a?
Well, it's a 20-foot span is what determines the bridge, and I don't believe that we have any of those on record. It's mostly multiple culverts, squash culvert pipes, box culverts on our larger streams.
Yeah.
This type of structure being, you know, the vertical abutments with decking is very rare.
Yeah. So,
We own it, we're gonna have to fix it, obviously.
Charlie,
Well,
what's the Greek
we're aware
or
of it, so-
Latin term for possession is 9/10 of the law. And for better or for worse, since 2017, we took possession of it. Now, you know, we can all sit around and talk about, well, we took something in possession that we would have never taken possession of if we knew 3 years later it would start to show this. Well, you know, it does, and we got to do something about it. So we, you know, this today to me was the first foray to at least explain to the town board the condition. And, you know, the last page was the action plan that is being proposed to go down the path of fixing this or whatever. The nice thing is, it doesn't need to happen by the end of the year because of what I said earlier. The New York State Department of Transportation bridge experts have now given us that it's gonna last 10 to 15 years. That's nice, but I think we need to keep this forefront of our, action plan, because we need to get this done sooner than later. Because if we did kick it down the road, I mean, I don't know if anybody realized we have some inflation going on in the world. It'll probably cost the town exponentially more money if we go to fix it in 6 or 7 years. And the reality is, when town administrations turn over and new board members, it's not unprecedented that it's forgotten. And 12 years from now, there's something happened where the bridge collapses, and we're like, well, how the heck did that happen? And somebody goes and dusts off the archives and sees that there was a workshop back in 2022 that said that's exactly what's going to happen in 10 to 15 years. Not to be morbid, but, so, that wasn't really Q&A, was it, Patty? That was more commentary,
That's all right.
but,
I mean, I appreciate all the hard work that you've done on it, and I'm actually feeling much better that I'm educated and up to speed on what's going on with it. And I'm sure this isn't the last time we're going to see this.
yes, and,
I'm a little skeptical on grant opportunities, because when I drive around the city, not so much the town, and I look at the condition of some bridges, I think that they're going to rise to the list much faster than this one, but
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're being realistic, not really skeptical.
I'm not going to ask the specifics, but if we looked at the costs, at the breadth of the cost for the last two solutions, let's put it that way.
No. At this point, it's been a fact-finding situation, trying to get the appropriate parties involved with that effort to try to figure that out. So we haven't gotten to a point of actually solidifying any of these
And it's not something,
options.
it's not something we would do in-house, I assume, correct?
Haven't made it that far. I mean, a box culvert is within our capabilities of installing. We've done it for the county and ourselves before. Yeah, so that could be a potential cost savings area to perform the installation in-house. But given what's there now and what we might do, and the wide variance in what the actual replacement or repair plan might be, it's just really not appropriate to even speculate right
Right.
now what the cost would be. This infrastructure is very expensive, I can say that, but there's such
It's
a wide
expensive,
range.
and it would take time.
Yeah, time that, if we do use our own staff, the biggest issue with that is we save money overall, but other things don't get done, to put it very
It would have to be
basically.
done in season. I mean, it's not something you can do.
Yeah, no, well, and there is no season. So winter is not the construction season for doing
Correct.
drainage. Winter is plow season. So, yeah, you don't even have that option. And it really can't be done passively, closing a road. This isn't a situation where you'd have a one lane open for this type of construction. That entrance would have to close. So we would want to, whoever does it, hit it very quickly to minimize the impact to the folks that use it on a daily basis. Really shorten that timeline as much as possible, regardless of the
Yeah.
proposed solution.
Councilman Abbott just asked me if this was the only way in. And I said yes,
No.
but there is another?
No.
There's another, okay.
Yeah,
Where-
which is via other residential streets.
Yeah,
Yeah, they have to drive through other subdivisions.
Yep. Yeah, there's another
Okay.
street, one over, and then you
Yes.
come through the
Yep.
neighborhood through a connector road within, which is what I think
couldn't
some of the
remember
heavier
if it was the only
traffic.
way.
Yeah.
No, this is not the only access. It's
So we
the most
could close
direct.
the entrance off and do the work and then reopen it.
Yep.
Correct.
yes.
Inconvenient, but it could be done.
Yes.
Yes, and one other thing I want to bring up is that leading up to tonight's presentation by Mary Ann Pat, we use this agenda item tonight as kind of a prototype of something that we've been bantering around as far as communication from the town government to our citizens. we know we post these agendas in the Webster Herald and on Facebook and on our website. But because this is so specific to a neighborhood, people that live on Pathway Lane and people that live on, thank you. Greatfield, that's right, is that we reached out to their homeowners association president. We also, with emails and information we had on the citizens, to let them know a couple days ago that you might want to, this is happening. And this presentation, and you might want to, and I take it, Dennis, that's why you're here tonight?
Yes.
Okay. So it wasn't because you saw it in the Webster Herald or on our website. You overtly got some communication from the homeowners association president or from my office.
Yes, my name is Dave Denolfo.
Oh, did I say Dave? I'm sorry. Yep.
I'm a resident of Arbor Creek, and right now, the community is transitioning to a homeowners association.
Yes.
board,
Yep.
And I am on that board, so
Good. Good.
this is my first task.
Yeah. And from fairness standpoint, full disclosure, we also reached out and let the developer know that too, that if they wanted to attend or watch or whatever. So, as time goes on, as we have very specific presentations that affect a certain neighborhood, we're going to try to do that because, Bill and Patty, you've been on the board the longest. Charlie, you've been here. I didn't know about that. That comes up sometimes 2 to 3 weeks after a board presentation. We're going to try to eliminate that in the future, so. Well, any other questions or comments? Jenny?
Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
It's very, very thorough.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary and Pat.
They didn't install it correctly.
All right.
That's what I'm saying.
Chris, we're not going to short you. Our next item tonight is a discussion with Chris Bilo, who is our Commissioner of Parks and Recreation, regarding the process of renaming North Pond Parks to the Charles E. Sexton Memorial Park. So, oh yeah, we have to slide you in there. We don't have the podium up tonight, do we? And while Chris is getting in, Chris was our guest last night on the electronic town meeting with Barry Howard, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and myself, and he is a natural.
I watched it, he did a great job.
He did, didn't he?
Yes.
Baton is yours, Chris.
I can promise that I don't have, like Mary and Pat had, I don't have a lot of slides, et cetera. So mine is going to be more information-based and sharing kind of what's transpired in the last year. And just so everybody's aware, this information was presented to the Prozar board Monday night this past week, so they're aware of this recommendation as well. So for those of you that don't know who Charles Sexton was, Charles was actually the very first recreation director that worked for the town of Webster. He was employed from the town from 1962, retired in 1996. So 34 years of service in the town of Webster. So obviously being the first recreation director is very important. He was also the first African-American recreation director in New York State, so very significant. Charles passed away June of last year at the age of 89, and the process for what I'm talking about this evening started about a month after Charles passed away. Obviously, from a department standpoint, what we are today basically is a result of what Charles did in his 34 years. Being the first director for the department, he was responsible for things that are still going on. He was the one that started the senior program, running the very first offerings for that group. He started the summer camp program, which obviously we still continue today. So everything that we do now is based off from what Charles did back when he started in 1962. Upon hearing of Charles' passing, the department obviously felt it was important to sort of honor or recognize Charles in some way. And coincidentally enough, about a week or so after we had some brainstorming sessions internally, I was contacted by Charles' daughter-in-law, who asked if there was any possibility that the town would have any sort of recognition for her father-in-law. And I said, actually, we're looking at doing something right now, and sort of created that dialogue with the Sexton family of what would be appropriate. Through that dialogue, it came up that, as they said, his cherished project while he was here in town was the creation of North Ponds Park, and it would be appropriate or fitting that if we rename that park to the Charles E. Sexton Memorial Park. So that's sort of how the background started, and where we got to, I'll say, late summer of '21. Then with COVID going back into high gear, the Sexton family asked if we could hold off until '22, as a number of the Sexton family is on the West Coast in California, so it involves a lot of travel for them to come in town. The family and I have been back in touch in the last month and a half. They have asked if, with this going forward, that we could have a ceremony the week of April 18th, having it on Friday, April 22nd. I believe that there is a service or some sort of a ceremony for Charles locally taking place on that Friday in the morning. So it'd be appropriate to have some sort of a ceremony event take place that afternoon. But also coincidentally, thanks to Patty, reminded us that it is also Earth Day, so whatever we do from a ceremony standpoint, we can obviously tie in Earth Day. North Ponds, as you know, recently, last year, had a number of ash trees that were taken down. We have talked about, from a replanting program, putting new trees in, so it ties in kind of nicely in regards to getting both of those pieces tied together. In discussion with the family, weather permitting, it would be actually done on site. We have confirmed with the family the name. There were some minor things, adding the E. Sexton instead of just Charles Sexton. We actually are also in the process of doing what Glenn, our Parks Director, is calling a sign inventory in all of our town parks. And there's a number of signage issues that we are going to be addressing over the next several years in regards to updating and kind of creating a new look for our park signs. This gives us a perfect opportunity to sort of, I'll say, kickstart that with having a new look for our entrance of our park signs. Because of the discussion back and forth, I was hoping to have an example of what the sign may look like tonight. We are kicking around a few ideas, but that is still being worked out. As soon as I get some of those renderings, obviously pass those along. But the idea is to have that ceremony take place on the 22nd. Short ceremony. The family does have a few family members they would like to have speak. They have asked if we could reach out to a few of the old Parks and Rec employees that worked when Charles was still working for the town. A few of them I'm actually aware of, so I'll reach out to them, see if they'd be happy to or be willing to come in and speak. Obviously, I'd like to have somebody from this board be present at that event and just have some presence and say a few words. Because it is break week for us, I unfortunately will not be here that Friday night. But Katie Kovar, our Recreation Director, and Glenn Morrell, our Parks Director, are both here. And they'll both be present for it.
I will certainly be there.
I think the only other logistically thing we would want to button up before is probably the town board meeting prior to the 22nd would be to have a resolution to formally adopt the name change. So the process on the 22nd is more or less just the unveiling of the new sign, et cetera.
One of the things that I had mentioned when I realized that coincidentally it was Earth Day, and you did talk about planting trees to replace those trees that we've lost, but I thought it would be really great if part of that ceremony was that we could plant one tree in memory of Charles. I think it would be really great if we even had a small plaque on the tree at some point in the future that was planted on that day in memory of him.
Yep, those are all sort of I'll say the pieces of that ceremony that we're trying to iron out right now.
And as far as being weather dependent, could get a tent if we needed it, I assume.
So we talked, when we were doing the planning, we've already booked out the rec center, so that if it is, you know, April 22nd, you never know what you're
It could
gonna
snow.
have. Could snow.
Yes.
So if it is weather, you know, needs to be canceled or moved, we have the backup. They've asked if they could have it at the rec center, so we'll do it
Okay.
there.
Okay. Sounds like you got it covered.
We already, yep.
You know, it's funny, the only thing I'll say is that I, without getting into a lot of detail of my past life, so to speak, I've watched certain Hall of Fame inductions or naming of things where an organization starts to dilute so far that you have people in the Hall of Fame or name things that they really didn't, they weren't worthy of it. This is the exact opposite of that. I mean, when you know, your resume, you're 34 years. You know, our first Parks Rec director, all that. Everything you just read off. And selfishly, because I met Charles and got to know him a little bit in 2019, and just a gentleman. I don't know, do you know him, Charlie?
No, actually, I didn't, no.
Patty?
I don't, but I know that I came to Webster shortly after 62. And the name Charles Sexton was synonymous with the Recreation
Yep.
Department. It,
Yeah.
yeah.
Bill, did you know him?
I met him a couple times over the years that I lived here.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people that have thought very highly of Charles.
Same here.
And unfortunately, I will not be in town on this dedication, but
Yeah. And that, you know, I'll be there.
I can tell you too, Barry Dean,
He definitely wants to be there.
he's
Yeah.
already reached out to me. He's, you know, he shared his desire to be part of it as well. As he-
And I'm
I will be
assuming,
there.
Good.
I'm assuming because you did not meet him, but I don't want to assume anything, and I take it you did not either, 'cause-
Well, I think I maybe did because I'm out a lot in my community. So, and I mentioned, you know, a couple people, I'm with also with the museum liaison. And we have a meeting, you know, yesterday, and they did mention it. And when I told them about it, we're gonna do this, and they were all astonished. They love it.
That's
because
great.
We've been trying to do a history about our African American that live here and that dedicated their lives and be part of our history. And he's part of it.
yeah.
So,
Well, it's funny, I mean, he retired in 1996, and I mean, that's 26 years ago. I moved to Webster in 1996, so, I mean, it's getting a long ways, so unless, I mean, I could foresee that we do the resolution on the 21st, because we could also double down. If any family is in town, they could come. We could
Yeah.
do a thing that makes the April 22nd,
That'd be
Charles
ideal.
E. Sexton Day in Webster.
That's ideal.
So, you know,
Let's get it done.
let's get it done. Thanks, Chris.
I'll keep you updated.
Thank you.
thank you.
Told you I'd make up time for it.
Thanks.
And last but not least, I think, is this presentation by both Steve, you, and Paul, or you? And is Chris, are you getting involved in, you
I
know?
think it's primarily me, but I'll probably defer to them if I need them.
Well, you
It
do what
involves
you gotta
three
do,
of
but
us.
this is,
It involves all three of us, so.
you know, it's funny, because it's a presentation on Rec Track and Munis Cloud Hosting. To the layman who read this on our agenda, they might be like, what the heck does that have to do with? I think most people now who are in the 21st century know what cloud hosting means. I will just simply say that Rec Track is the main application software, whatever, that Chris's unit use over at the rec department. And Munis is the main application software packet that Paul, your finance department, uses, and
Right.
also HR.
Yep.
Yeah, HR, finance, payroll, the
So
whole package.
with that, baton handed.
Well, and the nice thing is, in the 21st century now, more and more products are going this way. So these are the two largest systems the town runs, RecTrack and Munis, and they're probably the two most important ones. Of course, Paul's finance, controls all the money. RecTrack, Chris can't really do anything without that system. I mean, it even controls some of the door locks in his buildings and things of that nature. So these two systems are probably the two largest ones the town operates. The IT department, a lot of people think computers, stuff like that. But when we purchase things, we don't just purchase just a computer, we purchase resources for all these systems, which also includes all the other departments as well. Every department kind of has their own system that's running off of all of our resources. So what the IT department tries to do is to try to keep our budget to a minimum. We don't just go out and buy everything all at once. We try to buy our resources to run these applications and systems over the years and then try to maintain them and keep them up and running. So when you look at what I've presented, and it shows the RecTrack total annual cost and the Munis total annual cost, those costs are basically based upon all the resources that the IT department has purchased over like the last 5 or 6 years to run these systems. And that IT cost would be if I was to charge back to a department to run that system, that's how much the department would have to reimburse the IT department for what we spent over the years to put those resources in place to make that system run. Then on top of that, the departments also have to then purchase their own support and maintenance and licensing contracts from their vendors, because as an IT guy, I don't know anything about finance or recreation departments. They're the experts on that, so they're better suited at trying to find those vendors, find those products, and then we work with them to make sure that they run on the resources that we're able to get. So that's why also you'll see the licensing and support costs from each department for a grand total of how much the town has to pay annually to run those products. As you can see, RecTrack, right now the town has paid $24,000 to run RecTrack, between the licensing costs, processors, memory, storage. I won't get into all the technical stuff. Munis, the same thing, as you can see, but much larger product, much more important product. Sorry, Chris. As you can see, my cost and Paul's cost comes to a total of about $76,000 that we pay currently to run that system in the town. These systems, though I've been here, it'll be 20 years next week actually. These systems, when I first started working here, they weren't half as complicated as they are now. I mean, the first Munis server, I'd never even touched it. I think Kathy Tanay did all the work herself.
I used to run it.
Oh, that's right, you used to run it too.
I don't know anything about computers.
The systems now are so complicated and so fragile that it takes specialized talent to maintain them now. These are all basically database systems. I am not a database administrator. I've been around a while. I know how to do a lot of things. That's one thing that I don't know is database administration. I've kind of muddled through it through the years, to help keep things up and running. But the systems now are to the point where they're so complicated and so complex that it takes more than one expert to run it. It takes a whole team of people to keep these systems up and running. So what we'd like to try to be able to do is, as Tom alluded to, most people know what cloud hosting already is, but cloud hosting is basically where a vendor has their own data center, and they've spent the money to put in the resources so that all of their clients have the capability of having that product hosted in their data center and accessible via the internet. They could build out bigger data centers that are much more fault tolerant and redundant and have much more resources than we can afford to do. And then they turn around and they charge us back for the resources, just like I have broken out here. So to do that, Tyler Works would be looking at charging Paul $73,000 for cost savings of roughly $3,000 to the town. And Vermont Systems would be looking at charging Chris back $18,000 for roughly a $6,000 savings to the town, over time, of course. These are the tangible things that we can save and do. By doing this also, there's a whole group of non-tangibles involved. There's Of course, you get dedicated experts, a team of experts to be able to maintain those products versus myself and John Camille trying to call support and figure out how things work and make it happen. It reduces the complexity of requesting support. As Chris knows, we did an update about a month ago. Yeah, it was a nightmare. The update did not go well. It broke the whole system, and then that's when the whole support nightmare begins because I don't know how to contact them. They only listen to Chris's department. So basically the gist of it is the company tells Chris there's an update, I get the update, I break it, I call Chris, Chris has to call the company back, that company then has to get a hold of me to get into the system, and it just becomes this big, huge rolling mess of who's calling who and coordinating efforts to be able to get the system up and running. It took, what, about a week? You know, and to have that system down for a week, that's not very cost effective for the recreation department or the town. And a lot of labor was put into the coordination of those efforts to get that system back up and running. By moving it off the cloud and putting it in their data center, in their, well, Vermont Systems data center, that's all completely removed. Because the IT department now is completely out of the picture. It's not running in our data center, it's not running on our servers, it's not using any of our resources. The only thing the IT department in town has to provide the department is internet access, which the town board has graciously over the years put in a very redundant system for that. All of our telephones go through the internet, the computers all go through the internet with battery backups, generators, fault tolerant connections. We pretty much give you 4 nines of uptime for internet. So if we could get all that moved off to the data center for RecTrac and for Munis, those two systems, in my professional opinion, would be much better suited there and would be able to give you a much better uptime and security and resiliency by giving it to them. And then, like I said, it would also then help keep the IT department's budget a little more flat because the IT department, you know, like I said, we buy things over the years to try to keep things up and running, but things are always growing, always constantly changing, always. So, like, we were looking at upgrading a server this year, but now we have to add a server instead of upgrading it, which means we have to keep an older one in place longer because we've already outgrown our capacity. So by moving these two systems, I don't need to add a server. I can just upgrade a server or even for this year, keep that additional server running. So we're actually removing work from our data center, which would reduce the likelihood of having to increase the IT budget. Can't guarantee it, but
In the case of Munis, our annual bill will go up about 29,000, but Steve's estimating that the savings will be 32, so it's pretty neutral
yeah, I mean,
in that regard. And how many servers does Munis run on, just as an example of the complexity? It's like 8 servers.
yeah. Say before when I first started working here,
I
it
mean,
was
it's
running
crazy.
on one old server back in the
Yeah.
back room, and now but
Unix.
now it's actually on. Well, it runs on 3 physical servers, which you break that out, it's like 8 virtual servers that provide services to keep that all up and running. Not to
Yeah.
get into too much technical speak,
Yeah,
but
many layers of complexity.
Yes.
And they were asking us to add another server in August because we're going to go through a big upgrade.
right. And then also by adding the HR stuff and ESS, that now we have a web server that's running for it all, which we have to worry about that
ESS,
security.
correct.
And
Very complex.
so yeah, so the system have grown to the point where it would be cost effective to have Tyler Works maintain it, because like I said, they have a whole army of people that's their specialty. They work on that product, and that's it. Whereas the town of Webster has John Camille and myself, and we kind of do everything and know a little bit about Munis.
Yeah.
How long has this company been out?
Tyler Works or Vermont Systems?
The RecTac, whatever?
Oh, the RecTrac company, that's Vermont Systems. They've been around, what, Chris?
Vermont Systems, they've been around for 20-plus years, easy.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
easy.
and I
Because I've
know-
worked with them.
I know Tyler Works has been around forever.
Yeah, Munis, which is the product we use, has been around, I think, at least from the 1980s. We installed it in 1990. We've had it ever since. But Tyler is a much larger company. They own many, many, many software products, so
Yeah, Tyler.
they've been around.
Yeah, Tyler Works is
Quite a
like
while.
the 800-pound gorilla in a room when it
Yeah,
comes to
based in
municipality
Texas.
software.
I had an opportunity to you sent this out to us in advance of the meeting, and I reviewed it all. And after reviewing it and after listening to you, I don't see a reason why we wouldn't do this.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense, and then, and like I said, the nice thing is, like, these are the two largest systems, which we really should be doing as quickly as possible, but all the other departments, they all have their own proprietary systems as well, you know, because local government it's a unique environment. It's not like a manufacturing company where you just, like, you know, have a widget that performs a function. So a lot of departments, they kind of have their own unique systems as well, and a lot of those systems also, those vendors also provide these services as well. So if we could also break out the cost of supporting those systems versus maintaining them and getting them out of our data center, we would improve the functionality of those systems, improve the support of those systems, and like I said, hopefully keep the IT department flat until after I retire.
What's the cost to
That's the key.
switch?
I'm sorry?
What's the cost to switch, to make the upgrades?
To do Munis, it would be this year $76,000, and, or no, I'm sorry, it'd be $73,000, and to do RecTrack, it'd be $17,980.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
But in the
And you
case
don't
of
have that in
Munis,
your budget, obviously.
no,
but in the case of Munis, we've already paid the annual license fee
Same.
and support
Right.
fee of 44,000, so it'd be billed 29,000 more.
29, okay.
And
Oh,
same
sorry.
for, and same
Yeah,
for
'cause the
Vermont.
and
44
same for
annual.
Vermont System, Chris has
We've
already paid his
the
licensing fee
73,
for the
so
year.
It'd be like, I think their quote was like 10.9, I don't have it in
Right.
front of me, it was like
Right.
10.
So 29
And,
and 10.
Well, and then you said that they would prorate it for the year too,
Yeah, and
correct?
it would-
Yeah, and then the price would be prorated for the year, and
Correct.
then the other really nice thing is, since Paul was planning on doing an upgrade to Munis this year, it kind of falls right into it, because they said it would be much easier to roll it over
Yeah.
to this platform and then do the upgrade in their data center versus, you know, my time, Paul's time, their time, sending people here to get it all updated and upgraded.
send
It just-
data files
We send
and
the data
everything.
file to them, and they put it in their data center, and then they upgrade it.
So we're looking at approximately 40,000, but then you're talking about we may have to buy a new server if we move forward with it the way it is, and it's,
And they're, exactly, and it's funny, and I know, when Steve showed this to me, and actually we started talking about it, and then we had Councilman Cahill, who's now the
Yeah.
IT liaison, and we went through it. I was having a hard time reconciling, like, okay, wait a minute, you know, if we're going up 30 grand, let's say, to cloud-based, now how are we saving money? And it finally clicked with me, is that it's kind of one of those things where, and this is what I've said in the last year, that our one-year budget cycle in government doesn't quantify the fact that every 3 or 4 years, if you have to spend $100,000 on new equipment, servers, hardware, whatever, that's a 1-year 100,000, but then it's not in your budget the next 3 years. Well, you're increasing the budget by 29,000 consistently over the next 4 years, but you don't have to buy a
Right.
server for 100 in one of the years.
To be
That
honest.
made sense, that was helpful for me to reconcile it. Actually, it spawns a lot off what we're doing with enterprise,
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. I will tell you this, so that was the tangible to me, and I kind of had a leg up on this because I went through it with my company, years ago. And it's funny, because it was great to see Councilman Cahill, who at first thought, well, this is all about storage in the cloud and disaster recovery. Couldn't we go to a company outside of Munis and whatever and do that? And the reality is, that's only one component about going out into the cloud.
right.
It's an important one. They're always going to be, these companies are always going to be more on the cutting edge of technology than we'll ever be at the town. Don't take that the wrong
No,
way,
like,
Steve.
no, you're 100% correct.
It's just a fact, right?
A two-man department can't compete with a 1,000-person company, so.
But the one thing that I think that this board has seen in the last 2 years, and it happened back in March, April, May, when COVID first started, was how important it can be to have remote access. And, you know, Chris, I know that, you know, and I don't want to rub salt in the wound here, when RecTrack was down, because essentially Steve and John Camille were put into the middleman role between the town and their servers and RecTrack doing their upgrade, but That would have been seamless if we were in the cloud. They would have just done it and we'd be done. You were down for a week. You couldn't schedule classes. You couldn't do
We
any
couldn't
of that
scan,
stuff.
people couldn't scan in. We couldn't track who was in the building.
How much does that cost? You know, it's hard to quantify that. When you do some of these events where if you had a laptop out there and it was point of sale where somebody was signing in to an event out at a field or whatever,
We,
remote access, you could conceivably.
yeah, the example I shared with when we had this meeting was, fell on the same week that we had that polar run over at North Ponds on a Saturday morning. We had 120 people that were registered. We had people that walked up the day of, and because we don't have remote access, we had a printed off roster of those 120 names. And as people came up, they said, "Oh, I registered last night." Well, if they registered after 5:15, after we ran that list, they didn't show. If we have the ability to open up a tablet, open up RecTrack because it's cloud-based, we can go in and see lifetime exactly who's registered.
Now, and this will be my last statement about this, and like I said, I got a leg up because, Steve, we've been going over this in our IT meetings and whatever. So this is the first time the board is hearing this. I'm obviously a big advocate of this for all the reasons that you have on this page and all that. I will say this, and we talked about it at our last meeting. Remote access is a phenomenal thing, and there's a lot of benefits to that, and it's 21st century. That does not mean, by any stretch of the imagination, do I advocate that all of a sudden, Chris, you're going to have a lot of your staff come to you and say, well, I want to work from home. I'm not an advocate of working from home for remote access just globally, because there's a lot of jobs that should not be based out of your house. Remote access is nice, and there are some jobs that it might work for, but by no means, I mean, and if, as we go forward with this, and if we do this with Munis, and we do this with RecTrack, then we're gonna be looking at IPS. And,
Ideally, I'd be looking
you know,
at the other
which is
departments,
the,
do the same thing.
Bill, as you know, it's the BAS,
Yep.
the DPW's software that also.
So you have IPS,
assessment
you
works.
have Donnelly System and the town clerk, that's also run by the same company.
Right.
Laserfiche, there's a bunch of other systems that could possibly fall into the same model as well. And from an IT perspective, I try not to be too technical, it makes a lot more sense because also now we don't have all of our eggs in that one basket. RecTrack is now in Vermont Systems Data Center. TylerWorks would be, or Munis would be in TylerWorks Data Center. Let's say IPS would be over at Edmund Gov's data center. Now, if something catastrophic was to happen here,
Yeah.
the data's at those other locations and it's still safe. Let's say Chris's vendor for RecTrack has a security breach and they get in and it affects his system. It doesn't affect us, it doesn't affect the other hosted systems, it's isolated at one location. So it kind of helps spread that security concern around from an IT perspective as well. So I mean, there's way more positives than there are negatives to it. I mean, you have the initial cost, but like I said, it kind of works out to be a wash over time. Really the only negative thing from an IT perspective I can come up with is if there's any systems that have to work with another system, there's a little more complexity involved in that. Like, let's say,
Like an interface type of thing?
right, let's say RecTrack needs to talk to Munis for billing, I'm just making
Right.
it up, of course. To be able to get those two data centers to talk to each other, we would have to get involved, there'd be a lot of coordination between those vendors to make that happen. But I don't really foresee a lot of our systems having that as an issue. I mean, I can't say 100%, but
I don't think we have our systems talk to each other interface now.
not really, not right now, no. Most of them are pretty isolated.
Well, and I certainly want to keep, if there's more questions and whatever, I would just, you know, I've said I support this, and I also, you know, as we go on through the year, we got 10 months left in this year, we have a 2022 budget that we adopted with appropriation lines. So this was not a glimmer in our eye back when we were adopting the 22 budget. So this is gonna change things. Paul, I mean, if we can keep apprised on the board level of budget transfers and/or amendments that need to be done to make ends meet as we go through this transition.
Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's, obviously we can't,
It's not specifically in the 22 budget, so we'd have to cover it with contingency funds or through other lines that we know are going to come in under budget.
correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but isn't there something of hardware purchases that now all of a sudden could go away?
Yeah, well, I was originally looking at upgrading a server this year, which then was going to become a server that had to be added because we were exceeding our capacity. If we were to do this, I could get all his servers and Chris's servers off, and then I don't really need that server this year.
Yeah.
I'd be able to put it off until next year, and then I could give you back probably $10,000-12,000.
Because I certainly want,
Well, it makes sense to move forward with it, and we just have to figure out how we're gonna come up with the funds.
Yeah, and the other thing, I
Amen.
mean, I'm already looking at next year's budget, and we're looking at having to
Shall
upgrade our storage and all this other stuff, and by reducing those resources, the cost that I'm gonna be asking for next year, you're still gonna have sticker shock like you do every year, but will be less than what I would normally ask for.
Right. right. Any other
We're gonna remember
questions or comments on this? Jenny? All right.
Like I said, technology, we have to keep up with it, so it says accessories.
Well, that's it. That concludes tonight's town board workshop. Thank you, everybody, and have a great weekend.